So in this Python video, we'll be looking at how we can use tuples. So essentially, in the previous video, we went over what a list is and how lists work. So in this video, we'll be looking at tuples, which work in a similar fashion, except that with tuples, you can't really edit the contents in the tuple, unlike a list. So I'm going to get to that stuff in a little later on, same video, but for now, let me show you how to actually initialize a tuple. So I'm just going to create a variable called tuple, so tp equals tuple, and if I go ahead and print this tuple, as you can see, it is a empty tuple which has been initialized in this variable. Now, other than initializing an empty tuple, we can also do something like this. So tp equals 1, 2, printing p, and we get a tuple. So yes, this is a little strange when it comes to initializing a tuple. Now, I'm positive this is a tuple because I can do something like this. So type F9, and you can see it's a class of tuple. So we are initializing a tuple. Now, this is one way. Let me show you a few other ways to do it. So tp equals so that's also another way of doing it. Now, every time you do this, it's just going to have one item, and you need to have the comma. If you do something like this and run it, it's just going to be a number, and I can show you that it is a number just by doing that. So it's an int. Usually it should be a tuple, but this one's an int. So let me go ahead and show you what other things we can do. So we can also do tp equals 1, 2, and obviously that's going to be a tuple with 2 items. And we can also have tuple within a tuple. Like, we just have to make sure that the brackets match. And if I go ahead and do a print statement on this, you can see it's 1, 2, and then a tuple inside a tuple. Now, many times if you are using a list, it'll be useful to convert a list into a tuple. So just before doing that, an occasion which you'd use a tuple is, say you had read-only data. So say I had a list called user. You wouldn't really do this in real programs. I mean, you can, but I'm just showing you an example. So you had a user called, I'm just going to put my name and my age and my year, so 1927. Now, suppose you had queried a database and you've got 3 fields. So this is a row in a database, and if I print this, we can just say that this is a user. So I'm Ahmed, age 20, and my date of birth year is 1997. Ideally, when you're getting stuff from a database, you don't want to actually, you don't want to actually edit the contents. What you can do is just use the contents. So this takes it to mutability and immutability. So a list is a mutable data type, which means the things inside here can actually change. Now, a tuple is an immutable data type, which means once you've initialized or created or converted a list into a tuple, or just initialize a tuple, you cannot change the contents of it. So say I wanted to use this as a read-only. I could create a user tuple and do tuple and then give it the name of the variable that holds the list. Now I can go ahead and print the user tuple. Now if we run this, we've created a tuple based off the list. So now we went from mutability to immutability. So if I was to actually change something, I am not able to, because the tuple's property is that it cannot be changed once it's been created. So I can actually show you that these are actually lists and tuples. If I do a print statement here, which has a user and And as you can see, one's a list, which is obviously that, and the other one's a tuple, which is this one right here. So we've converted a list into a tuple. Now, if I were to change, so let's say I wanted to change my first name. So typically with the list, you would do something like let user 0 equals Dave, and if you just print user, you actually get the name change. So let me just do a before and after, and let me get rid of that. So you had Ahmed before, and now you have Dave. So we've actually changed the contents. Now let me try doing this with a tuple. So we go user TP, and the first element equals, what's the name? John. Let's just do John. And if I go ahead and print the user TP, I get an error. So tuple object does not support item assignment. Basically, it's saying I cannot change my contents once after I've been initialized. So suppose you actually needed, for whatever reason, change a tuple's content. Well, with the list, we had a list, we converted it into a tuple, and when we printed it, it printed as a tuple format. So to do the other way around, we would have to get the tuple into a list, change the item in the list, and then convert it back into a tuple. So let me show you a quick example on how to do that. So say this was my tuple 1, and then let's just put a list inside of this. So I just do a print, and here we go. Now, an interesting thing with this right here is, so this whole thing is a tuple, but inside the tuple we've got a number, and then we've got a list, and we've got another number. Now you can actually change the contents within the tuple in this list, but you cannot change this whole thing. So what do I mean by that? Let me show you. Now if I wanted to change maybe 1, 2, 3, let me just make this 5. So from the previous videos on index notation, it'll be something like this. So TP, so this is the 0th and this is the 1th element, so we want to change 1. Now we have this right here, and I want to change this 1 to 5, 4, whatever. They go 0 equals 5, and now if I print TP, as you can see, we've changed from 1 to 5. Say I wanted to actually get rid of this list and maybe make it 1, 2, 3. We would do something like TP equals up TP, and we want to get the 1. So that's 0, 1, and 2. And I want to change this to 3, and we go ahead and print TP. Again, it's going to give me the same error as before. We can't actually change this whole item because it's inside a tuple, but we can change the items inside here because it's a list. So when operating inside of this, it's mutable, but when operating outside of that, it's immutable. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Now, going back to that initial problem where I wanted to change actual contents of the tuple, we would have to convert the tuple into a list. So that is quite straightforward. We had a list inside the tuple. We'd have a tuple inside a list. So just go tmp tuple equals list and give it the name of the tuple. Now we do a print on here, and we've got a list form of our tuple. So let's go ahead and change the contents. So temp tuple equals 3. So I'm basically changing this whole thing. Oh no, it's meant to be 2, so it should be 1, 2, 3. I go ahead and print the contents of the temp tuple, and now we have 1, 2, 3. So now to convert it back to a tuple, we would do TP equals tuple and temp tuple. Go ahead and print the tuple, and now we've got a tuple with the form 1, 2, 3. So from going there to there. So basically we had to convert the tuple into a list. So going from immutable to mutable, change the stuff, and then going from mutable to immutable. So I'm just going to show a few more examples. So let me go ahead and change this tuple. So again, I wanted to change the contents of a tuple. Say I wanted to reverse the list. So print tp.reverse. And it's giving me an error. So again, going back to the mutability property. So obviously, I can't stress this enough. You can't actually edit or even reverse the contents of a tuple. So that's just to kind of put the nail in the coffin. You cannot edit a tuple once it's been initialized. Now, to do the reverse operator or the operation on this tuple, I'd have to convert it into a list again. So let's go ahead and just make a list of this. So list tuple, and now I'm going to do lst, which is my list.reverse. So now if I print my lst, it's going to be a reversed fashion of this. And I go ahead and make the tuple, make the list into the tuple. So and I print my tuple, and as you can see, we have a reverse tuple. So from 1, 2, 3, 4 to creating a list, converting it into a list, changing the order, and then converting it back to a tuple. It's the same thing as adding the thing. So let me just adding an item into a tuple. Let me go ahead and show an example. Suppose I wanted to add another number. I would have to again convert it into a list. So immutability to mutable. So going from cannot change to being able to change. So let's go ahead and create a variable called list, convert the tuple into a list, and I wanted to add one more number, so I'm just going to go append, and let's do 5. So append adds it to the final, or to the rightmost section of the list. Go ahead and print the list, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so we know that we've successfully added a item into the list. And now to convert this list into a tuple, so tp equals tuple and lst print tp, and now we've got a tuple where we've added the element 5. I've skipped over the slicing. It's the same sort of thing. You'd have to convert your tuple into a list and slice from wherever you need to in the list, and then convert it back into a tuple. So that stuff you can actually have a look at my list videos. I think it was the previous video. But that's about it with the tuples. So it's just the idea that you cannot edit the items once you've created a tuple unless you convert it into a list and then convert that list into a tuple again. So that's sort of how it works. So see you in the next video.